Hello and welcome back to the Prestige Junkie Podcast. I am Katey Rich. I'm the awards editor here at The Ankler, and I am back for another edition of talking about award seasons of all stripes, which is an interesting task this week because we continue to be in the middle of Emmy season, but also a major international film festival has just wrapped up over in Cannes, France. So to talk about it all, there's really no one better than my friend, the co-host of the This Had Oscar Buzz podcast and the author of Vulture's Gold Rush newsletter, Joe Reid. Hi, Joe.
Hello. So nice to be talking to you on a podcast again. This is
I know. If you are following us both, you heard me with Joe and Chris Filan at This Had Oscar Buzz podcast talking about New York, not so long ago. So we're just taking our tour of podcasts everywhere, right?
Exactly. I love it.
Joe, you are a bright shining star, but there is another star on this episode. Later, you'll hear my conversation with Maya Rudolph about her show Loot. Breaking news for my co-host about who the interview is later on. We talked to her about Loot and how that show really grew in its second season on Apple. So look forward to that. But Joe, we're sitting here recording on a beautiful Memorial Day holiday because in France, it is not Memorial Day. It is the weekend after the end of Cannes. The Cannes Film Festival wrapped up with an award ceremony on Saturday. And I really think where we have to start, where anyone's going to start talking about this festival, is that Neon made it a full palm, 5 fingers of Palme d'Or winners.
5 fingers on a palm. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that metaphor, but man, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Neon came into the festival with Sean Baker's film Anora. In my newsletter last week, I talked to Tom Quinn from Cannes, the CEO of Neon, who talked a little bit about that movie and their faith in it. And Joe, in that same newsletter, I talked about the Cannes draft that you run, which is kind of a fun, silly thing that we do, but I think is also a really interesting way to gauge what people who pay attention to this stuff expect going into the festival in terms of what people really want to draft, what they want to have in their teams. Mm-hmm. And last year, infamously, nobody really picked Anatomy of a Fall until later on. This year, I think Anora was a little bit more in our sights. For people who followed Sean Baker, the Florida Project got that Oscar nomination for Willem Dafoe. We're not drafting films in this Cannes draft for Oscars specifically, but that's kind of where our minds go, right? Like, Cannes success leads to Oscar success more and more lately. So that's why we had our eyes on Anora, right?
I think so. I think the fact that Sean Baker has such a sterling track record from Tangerine to the Florida Project to Red Rocket, which was a Cannes premiere, to now Anora, to a lot of people, me included, he hasn't missed. And so it's a hugely anticipated event when he's, coming for especially film nerds like us, like, oh, the new Sean Baker. Mm-hmm. And the reviews were so good. I tried not to read too many reviews because what I know about the movie is so sort of ephemeral, and I kind of maybe want to see if I can keep it that way until I see the movie. I know Mikey Madison from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream. I think it was the Scream without a number in the title. Scream, which was Scream 5.
Which was not the original Scream, but the new Scream.
But yes. The new Scream 5. Let's all be honest about it. Scream 5. And also from the Pamela Adlon show on FX.
Oh, she was on Better Things?
Better Things, yes. Apparently that's where, I did not watch that show, but that is where she sort of emerged from. She got huge. She was definitely touted for the Best Actress prize before that was handed out. Ultimately, that went to the women of Emilia Perez, which we will definitely talk about. Yeah,
we'll get there, yeah.
But so there's just a lot to be excited about with Anora. And because Sean Baker, this is the first American... I believe this is the first American film to win Cannes since The Tree of Life.
It is.
So
indeed.
That was a Best Picture nominee when that happened. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Terrence Malick, has his own reputation that came with him. But You figure American film wins the Palme, that kind of automatically puts Anora on the Oscar map somewhere. The fact that lately the Best Picture category has been more and more welcoming to, Cannes winners anyway. So with The Triangle of Sadness getting the nomination 2 years ago. So there's a lot to be interested about if you are an Oscar watcher at
Yeah.
Cannes, if only for that. And there are several other movies, I think, that we could probably look to, but I think Anora definitely for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have read a little bit of reviews of Anora. I don't want to spoil anything. Again, we haven't seen it. But, you get basically the vibe of something between Red Rocket and Uncut Gems as this New York City set kind of crazy movie. And you're like, oh, okay, so two movies that got a lot of Oscar buzz and didn't get anything. Okay.
Sure. Yes.
Interesting comparison.
Yep.
But I was texting with my former VF colleague, David Canfield, who said his mom was really bugging him, like, what's the new Anatomy of a Fall? I want to know what it's going to be. What am I going to like? And he told her, like, Anora was the one. So that gives me a sense that there's a heart to this. And, Tangerine and Florida Project, I think, did have a lot of heart. Red Rocket was a little bit harder edged. And I just think Sean Baker has that potential, right? Like, he makes like kind of wild, out there movies, like about sex workers, about people who nobody else makes movies about. But there is a soul to it. And I think, especially with Neon, which really knows how to find heart, like, not to put it really cynically, but like Anatomy of a Fall is not a cuddly movie, but they made that movie into a sensation that everyone could really wrap their arms around. And it sounds like they could absolutely do that with Anora.
I think so. And I think the fact that they had multiple contenders here too this year, because if Anora wasn't going to win, there was a lot of talk that Seed of the Sacred Fig could also win. And that was another movie that, like, I think Neon sort of knows how to pick talent, you know what I mean? And they've become such a trusted brand because of that, especially in the realm of something like the Cannes Film Festival, which is where they've seen their biggest success. So, great for them.
Yeah, let's maybe linger on Seed of the Sacred Fig, which won a special prize from the jury, which I don't know the tea leaves there, but it seems like basically they really liked it and wanted to give it something. So they gave it a prize because they can.
Yes. I was sort of surprised that it didn't win anything sort of higher than that, because going into that final day, I think there were maybe 2 or 3 movies that a lot of people assumed were going to be the contenders for the Palm. That was Anora, that was Seed of the Sacred Fig, and it was also the Jia Zhangke film, Caught by the Tides. And ultimately, we'll talk about that when if we revisit the pool. But one of the interesting things about the Cannes pool is you can draft very well. You can draft like 4 movies that get like great reviews and whatever. And then the awards come and something like Caught by the Tides gets nothing. And it's just like, wait a second, like, hold on, just 1 minute.
Yeah. Last year, I feel like that was May, December. It it didn't win any awards in the end, but was still a very successful film. There's probably one every year.
So Seed of the Sacred Fig very well could have been like a major contender for Palme d'Or. And then all of a sudden it's like it all shakes out. And it's like, wait a second, we haven't given this movie anything, but we loved this movie. So Greta Gerwig's jury and their wisdom is like, well, why don't we just give this a special, I believe it was a special screenplay prize was the way they had described it. And it was ultimately something, at least, to let them recognize the fact that, like, we really love this movie. And also the fact that this filmmaker, Mohamed Rasulov, had gone through so much to get this movie out of there was... do you want to explain a little bit about what it took for him to be at Cannes? Sure. Was essentially smuggled out of Iran and sort of had been arrested by the state and was to be put in prison. And this is not the first time that this has happened to him as a filmmaker, that there is... Because of the nature of the movies that he makes, like the Iranian government is not a fan of him. That they are critical of the Iranian government, and it's an incredibly sort of fraught situation that I am like far too unqualified to speak on from a global politics perspective, but just from... Oh, sure. But I think that all we need to know, and people who are moviegoers need to know, is that like this is a guy who has really sacrificed a lot for the sake of his art, which I think really puts the exquisiteness of the film itself, like it makes it seem even more spectacular. Exactly. And if the Cannes Film Festival is going to be this kind of epicenter of global cinema, it's probably important to recognize that there are places in the world where it is harder to make these cutting edge and socially responsible, socially aware movies. Certain parts of the world are going to, be incredibly repressive about that, and are, incredibly repressive about that. So I was very, very glad to see that movie got some sort of recognition.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what Neon winds up doing with it. You know, they're not just the place that releases Anatomy of a Fall and brings Messi to the Oscars. Like, they have released other challenging films that don't necessarily have Oscar prospects. I mean, this is kind of like a legal thriller in some ways, from what I understand. So, like, there's that Anatomy of a Fall.
I was going to say, so hot right now. Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, I don't think you can make a fun campaign for this movie, just given the subject matter and the director's state. So that would be interesting to watch. I do feel like, you know, the hardcore cinephiles who follow this stuff, no matter what of Oscar buzz, will want to find that.
Get ready to have a long conversation about why the Academy Award International Film category is flawed, because it does require the country of origin to submit a film. So there's if there are stumbling blocks ahead for a movie like The Seed of the Sacred Fig, we can maybe have another conversation about how this is perhaps not the best way to get the best movies nominated and awarded at the Oscars.
There's some Oscar drama ahead to predict right there.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So earlier you mentioned Emilia Perez, which was, I think, the other kind of like starry, I mean, I guess Megalopolis, we can get there, but it was a big starry movie that won a big prize at Cannes. It won a shared Best Actress award for its stars, including Selena Gomez and Zoe Saldana. But I think that Carla Sofia Gasson, who is the first trans performer to win an acting award at Cannes, was kind of the big story from that.
Yes.
And it also won the jury prize, which is more or less third place, as far
more or
as I
less
understand.
Third place. Yes.
Yes. So Netflix picks up this movie during Cannes, which I think for many of us we see as a double-edged sword, because it's not necessarily going to get the theatrical run that it might. But that's a pretty huge platform for this movie from Jacques Audiard, who has made some successes, and then some movies like Our Beloved The Sisters Brothers, which nobody remembers ever existed. So I think it's going to be pretty major. Netflix is going to give that a lot of visibility that it might not have otherwise.
I think that's right. Yeah, Jacques Audiard, former Palme d'Or winner for Dupin, but has also made movies like A Prophet, which was an Oscar nominee. And
really broke out Tahar Rahim, who shows up everywhere these days.
Exactly. Rust and Bone, which came sort of within a hair's breadth of getting a nomination for Marianne Cotillard for Dancing with an Orca to a Katy Perry song. The Sisters Brothers, which you had mentioned, which is a Western with Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly and Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed, which is excellent. We just did this for my own podcast for This at Oscar Buzz recently, and I sort of was all the more energized for what a good movie it is, and it's so slept on. If you have not seen The Sisters Brothers, go seek it out. So yeah, Emilia Perez was a movie with a lot of, I remember we talked about it when we did the podcast, and we were like, what is this movie that he is taking to Cannes? Because it's just like, on the face of it, it's just like, well, it is a musical about a drug cartel and also a trans woman seeking to get gender affirming care. And also, by the way, Selena Gomez is in it, and Zoe Saldana is in it. And we're just like, what is this? And you could see 8 billion ways where a movie like this could go wrong. And then it turns out to be one of like the top 4 or 5 best reviewed movies of the festival. And even, this is one of those, the maybe 2 or 3 movies that even lay people who are not really paying close attention to Cannes probably heard about and was just like, what's this about a Selena Gomez musical at the Cannes Film Festival? Like, what's happening? So I think that ultimately will get some attention. Netflix is always sort of a little bit of a boogeyman for us, where we're hopeful that a movie that gets taken by Netflix gets the kind of support that we think it is worthy of. And a movie like Emilia Perez, you just want it to be in the conversation. You don't want it to be forgotten after a week. And that's the sort of the worry with Netflix a lot.
Well, I want to give them credit where it's due, because I do think May December, despite only getting that screenplay Oscar nomination, really got its moment. Like, we talked about that movie. There were the memes. Charles Melton star rose enormously. Like,
that's fair.
I think they did right by May December, and I don't know how similar Emilia Perez is to May December. It does sound like it's going to be something where some people really get it and some people really don't, and that's okay too. So I hope that is the path they can follow. I can't imagine them and Netflix kind of bashing their heads. Like, it's great that all 4 of your actresses shared a prize, but how in the hell do you campaign anybody when they're all Cannes winners? I'm not sure how that's going to go. I'm very interested to see how they figure that out. But yeah, I'm very, because Cannes critical reactions can sometimes predict how audiences react to something, and then sometimes absolutely not. And
sometimes very much not.
Amelia Perez really feels like something that is going to have many other lives in terms of reaction between now and when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from other award winners, as we said, not everything wins an award that is going to be worth talking about. But what else from these Cannes winners do you feel like we're going to be hearing about in the future?
I think Jesse Plemons getting the Best Actor prize for Kinds of Kindness is very interesting. Kinds of Kindness is Yorgos Lanthimos' latest film. It is, from what I understand, an anthology film. It's, broken up into segments. There's a lot of, Emma Stone is back once again after her Oscar-winning performance in Poor Things. And speaking of Poor Things, Willem Dafoe is also in it, and Margaret Qualley is in it. But like Hong Chow is in this, Joe Alwyn, Hunter Schafer.
Back from The Favorite. Good job with Joe Alwyn.
Yes, exactly. But Jesse Plemons is the one who has been singled out now by the Cannes Film Festival for Best Actor. So does this mean that Yorgos Lanthimos, who has coming off of now 2 straight Best Picture nominees, which also were and 2 straight Best Actress wins, this is a director who the Academy really likes, but as was mentioned quite a bit for Kinds of Kindness, this is Yorgos Lanthimos now returning a little bit to his more grimy, for sort of lack of a better term, the Killing of the Sacred Deer Lanthimos, and maybe the Dogtooth version of Lanthimos. And so Killing of a Sacred Deer, despite starring Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell and future Oscar nominee Barry Keoghan, didn't get anything at the Oscars. And I know that because we did an episode on that movie for my podcast. But so it's like, is Kinds of Kindness going to be another movie like that sort of turns the Oscar voters off? Or is the fact that Lanthimos is now a certified member of the club going to give Oscar voters more of a reason to put that screener in, to fire that screener up?
Yeah. And
to give this a look, and to specifically give Plemons' performance a look, which has now gotten a big old spotlight on it. Yeah. He's an actor who got his first Oscar nomination a couple years ago with The Power of the Dog, is in a very sort of, I say high-profile celebrity romance, and yet they're the most low-key of high-profile celebrity romances, Jesse and Kirsten Dunst.
But our level of investment in it is higher than maybe any other celebrity couple. I need them to be happy forever.
So I think Jesse Plemons as an actor and as sort of a movie star is in the exact right position to show up in. I mean, how do you categorize somebody from an anthology movie in the acting race? That's always been a challenge. I can't remember the last time I can think of an actor being nominated for an anthology movie, and maybe.
See, here I was thinking of The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which got 2 Oscar nominations that nobody thought was coming. But yes, that's a screenplay thing, and that was an anthology that didn't have actors playing different characters. Like Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone and others are in all 3 sections of the movie.
Right.
Also, we should mention it's coming out in June from Searchlight.
Yes.
So, this movie is right around the corner. I think we're going to do a whole future episode about summer movies and Oscar buzz and what kind of investment you should put in them. I mean, yeah, it's exactly what you said. Like, Yorgos Lanthimos is in the club. Jesse Plemons is someone we're rooting for. He's been in something like 10 Best Picture nominees, like some ridiculous stat in the last 10 years.
He's in The Post. He was in what else?
The Irishman, Judas and the Black Messiah, The Master. Someone run the numbers for us. So anyway, they are both very much in the club. But a summer movie, anthology movie that you were saying about how it feels like a pivot. Our friend David Ehrlich in his review called it an allergic reaction to his recent success. So you can imagine Oscar voters being like, okay, fine, we'll leave you alone. Like, don't worry about it.
Sure.
But at least we'll know for ourselves in a couple weeks what the reaction to that might be like, which will help.
Speaking of Oscar campaigns that I want to happen, Best Screenplay winner, The Substance, which is the film from Coralie Farjat. How do we pronounce
We'll figure it out. I'm sure we'll know soon.
Somebody dub me in with the correct pronunciation of Coralie's first name, and my sincere apologies. But The Substance was another movie sort of going into Cannes, and everybody read that sort of log line about this movie which talked about a fading celebrity deciding to use a black market drug, which is a cell-replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. And we're just like, what? What in the, we already have a Cronenberg in this festival. What are we doing now with another? But this was another one, sort of like Emilia Perez, that we had all these question marks about. And then it screened, and the reactions were bonkers, but also like positive bonkers, where everybody was like, this movie is insane, but also people really liked it. And this movie stars none other than Demi Moore, who is, you know, obviously brings with her all of this star power from the 90s that she had, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, who has spent the last 20 years sort of, you know, working, but not being the level of movie star that a lot of her contemporaries from the 90s were able to continue to be. You look at something like A Few Good Men, right? Which was a three-hander with Tom Cruise and her and Jack Nicholson. They were all sort of on the above the title for that movie. Tom Cruise, as big of a movie star as he's ever been. Jack Nicholson was working up through, you know, the
into
bucket
his
list.
80s, probably.
You know what I mean? So, and then Demi Moore had such a fast fade. And so is this the stuff of a great Oscar comeback narrative? And
100%. Like, and whether or not it happens, like, it is exactly. I mean, Brendan Fraser is not so long ago and is not quite, you know, an exact comparison, but pretty close. Like, I think that is the model you follow for something like this.
Definitely. And I always think about back to something like Pulp Fiction, right? Where John Travolta's nomination for Pulp Fiction was seen as this great comeback narrative. He was nominated for Saturday Night Fever, something, it was what would have been 16 or so years prior. And it was this great story. And it's like, yeah, but like John Travolta had just starred in the Look Who's Talking movies like 4 years before this. So it's not even the same thing. This is a much more, I think, interesting and impressive. And I imagine that Demi Moore is going to, you know, come back with a lot of stories about her sort of her time in the wilderness and her time in the spotlight. So I, for one, am massively invested in a Best Actress narrative, Best Actress campaign for Demi Moore, for The Substance. And whether Mubi, who is the distributor who picked up that this film, is going to be the distributor to do that, we can all hope.
I think they've confirmed a September release for this one.
I believe so, yes.
Yes, and it's going to be out in theaters. You know, Mubi is a streaming platform, but they have backed a couple of movies for theatrical release, and Fallen Leaves last year got that Golden Globe nomination that none of us saw coming for Alma Poisey, who is not Demi Moore in terms of name recognition. Like that's, you can imagine a lot more visibility there. Also, Joe, you and I, we go to the Toronto International Film Festival in September, and we've spent a lot of Cannes being like, well, I guess we're seeing The Substance on the first day of TIFF, because... First day
of TIFF is always your Cannes wrap-up day.
Yeah, so that is when we'll see a lot of these titles. They'll kind of, have the summer to chill out for a little bit. And at TIFF, maybe some Telluride also, you'll really see a lot of these come bouncing back up. Telluride's where I think Anatomy of a Fall last year had like lines around the block, and the attention for it really grew. So Demi Moore in Telluride, I can see it right now. She's going to look fantastic in a cowboy hat.
She's going to look tremendous. And we're all incredibly excited for that. The film also stars Margaret Qualley, who... unofficial mascot of the Cannes Film Festival this year, was in multiple movies, and is somebody who I do think on a long enough timeline is going to end up getting her Oscar moment. I don't think for The Substance. I don't think there was that kind of a reaction to her, but like Andy McDowell's daughter will make it to that promised land. Maybe we'll get a mother-daughter nomination one of these years out of Mark
God.
Andy McDowell.
Speaking of 90s stars, we want their comeback. I mean, Andy McDowell's like, I don't think she's had the same ups and downs as Demi Moore, but because she's all over the place. But bring it on.
Totally.
I'm going to rush us to the finish line because I do feel like we could talk about Cannes for 2 more hours. I want to just mention the other major prize winners. All We Imagine Is Light by Payal Kapadia, which is an Indian film, won the Grand Prix, which is second prize. And then Miguel Gomez's Grand Tour won Best Director. As you mentioned with the international feature Oscar race, like time will tell how much we see from either of them coming up.
Yes.
But to get to a wrapping up point, like I know the other two titles I really want to talk about, and you can tell me what I'm missing. Ahead of the festival, I had really kind of gotten myself hyped, being like, maybe Megalopolis and Horizon will just be these two huge follies that like pay off, and everyone like loves these directors for like putting their own money behind something. Like, thank God we have these millionaires who are willing to spend money on something as crazy as art.
Yes.
I'm not sure the reception for either of them bore that out. Maybe a little bit more so Megalopolis. Horizon, it's also coming to theaters this summer. We'll get to talk about that soon. But where are you on Megalopolis at this point? Obviously, we're dying to see it, but like, what do you expect for its future?
I mean, there is a not inconceivable world in which the Cannes reception has now altered the sort of baseline for impressing that this movie can have. Now, all of a sudden, we're like, expectations are very low.
Yeah.
And
so we know that Francis Ford Coppola has not pulled off an Apocalypse Now again and like wowed everybody. Like, it's a much more of a muted, again, passionate. Some people are passionate one way or the other direction, but expectations are different.
So there's a lot of room now for people stateside to watch this movie and be like, there's stuff happening in this movie that maybe there is, there's a performance here. There is a vision here that is, I don't know why those Cannes critics were quite so harsh. Yep. And where that drumbeat, should it ever happen, comes from will probably determine whether this has an outside shot at some Oscar nominations or not. I think there's, the Oscar voters have a history sometimes of doing these, reclamation projects on movies that were kind of disregarded. I always think of Seabiscuit in that regard, which was kind of seen as a non-factor in the summertime when it was released. And then come the end of the year, Oscar voters were like, no, you know what? Seabiscuit good. And so that ends up getting a Best Picture nomination.
So you're saying that Megalopolis has a lot in common with Seabiscuit. That is not the comparison.
This is what I'm saying. Megalopolis, a Seabiscuit saga is what I'm saying. But no, I just feel like Francis Ford Coppola is such a name in the industry, right? The Godfather is so incredibly foundational. Apocalypse Now, a foundational movie, that maybe it's a different version of the Academy that I'm wondering would sort of get behind. We are now dealing, as we have talked about in many, many recent years, with a bigger, younger, more diverse Academy. So maybe there isn't enough of that sort of old guard there to do it for Francis, but it's not over. Yeah. It's probably over, but it's not officially over.
And Megalopolis sounds like weird and ambitious and something that they might go for more than like a Coppola 90s movies that like didn't really get any traction somewhere. So, the same Academy that might go for The Substance or Kinds of Kindness might find something in there. But again, I think we're dreaming a little bit big there.
I think we probably are. I think with Horizon, it's a similar thing, sort of, except for the fact that, like, Kevin Costner, despite the fact that he is a former Best Picture, Best Director winner with Dances with Wolves from 1990, my impression is he's never quite been beloved in that same way. I think...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With, like, the water world thing where, the joke was... Kevin's Gate, you know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing with all the stories about how that movie was over budget. And then The Postman following that was such a bomb. I think there is a sense of, and he sort of also like quit Hollywood, you know what I mean? Like went to go live in on a ranch or whatever. And so there's never been quite as much rallying around Kevin Costner as a career. So I think Horizon's probably going to have to become a groundswell populist hit to make it, I think, by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a tough Oscar needle to thread. I mean, I think we've all seen how Yellowstone has been the most popular show on TV in many ways and has gotten absolutely nowhere with the Emmys. Different voting body, but maybe a similar kind of attitude. But yeah, as you said, Kevin Costner's got that Oscar. I mean, I'm still rooting for Horizon. At this point, I'm rooting for any summer movies to make money. Again, that's another future episode of this podcast. Sake. Somebody go see the movies. Yeah. Okay, so is there one last title you want to bring up, Joe, before we wrap up?
Bird. Andrea Arnold's Bird, which was another one of those movies, sort of like Jia Zhangke's movie, who I think a lot of people going into that final day on awards day was like, well, Bird's going to get something. And ultimately... not so much. But that was a hugely well-reviewed movie. And that's a movie with some, star power behind it in terms of Barry Keoghan, who is such an ascendant actor in Hollywood now, coming off of Saltburn. And of course, he was nominated for The Banshees of Inisherin a couple of years ago. And so Barry Keoghan and Franz Rogowski, the sexually chaotic pairing of all of our dreams. This is another movie where as soon as I saw that it was getting good reviews, I kind of like put it in lockdown in my mind of like, I don't want to know too much about it. But it's directed and written by Andrea Arnold, who is an incredibly exciting and interesting filmmaker. This was the woman who directed American Honey. And before that, movies like Fish Tank and Red Road. She had her sort of chaotic tete-a-tete with HBO over Big Little Lies that ultimately got taken away from her. Could not be more excited to see this movie when it eventually makes its premiere in the United States.
That's also a movie release, right?
It's also a movie release who released, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, Franz Rogowski's previous movie last year, Passages.
Yes, absolutely. And really kind of built him as a star. He won that New York Film Critics Circle Prize. Like, again, Oscar buzz didn't follow, but yeah, it's there.
Maybe Mubi is a few years away from becoming our new Neon. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, we also didn't mention A24, which has a couple of films that we've been talking about here. Paolo Sorrento's Parthenope, which I thought got reasonably well reviewed, and also picked up Ruben Östlund's next movie, which is still being made. The entertainment system is down with our friend Kirsten Dunst and Keanu Reeves. And that
was the most exciting news out of A24, I thought, at the Cannes Film Festival, was picking up that movie. I'm like, I have already purchased my ticket.
Absolutely. So yeah, even though they don't have like big, 5-in-a-row Palme winners to brag about, A24 very much still someone you want behind your big, ambitious Cannes movie.
Yeah, totally.
So Cannes is over, but hopefully you've been reading my colleague Greg Kilday's dispatches from Cannes in partnership with our friends at Screen International. You can catch up on all of those at The Ankler. And Joe, people can find you where?
You can find me and my podcast, This Had Oscar Buzz, wherever podcasts are provided. You can go to Vulture and sign up for our Gold Rush newsletter. I will be covering the Emmys all through Emmy season. You can also sign up for reminders for the game that I help run over there, Cinematrix, which is a movie grid game that Katey texts me about in frustration every morning, and I welcome those texts.
Most of the fine film fans of the world are texting in frustration or triumph about Cinematrix every day, so everyone should be playing it.
I love it. Socials, if you want to find me at Joe Reid on, let's say, Letterboxd, that would be great as well.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you for joining me. And I will be right back in a moment with my conversation with Loot star Maya Rudolph. So now let's hear my conversation with Maya Rudolph. She is currently starring in the second season of her Apple TV Plus series, Loot, which when it starts is about a woman who may remind you of a few real life people who is married to a very, very rich billionaire, gets divorced, and winds up with a huge fortune that she doesn't know what to do with. And as season 2 begins, her character, Molly Wells, has decided to basically give it all away and is working on this really ambitious venture to provide housing for unhoused people in Los Angeles. And Loot really grows in its second season into this very satisfying workplace comedy, which is something I asked Maya about. Obviously, she worked at SNL for a long time. I think she's talked a lot in the past about how when she does work, she really just wants to reunite with her friends, which is about how she's, shown up as a guest appearance on basically every good TV show you can imagine. And she told me really that the group scenes, kind of the conference room scenes on the show where she's in the same room with her co-stars like Michaela Jae Rodriguez and Joel Kim Booster and Ron Funches are her favorite ones to film, which I feel like you can kind of see as you watch the show. Loot is really delightful. It's really funny. It really allows Maya Rudolph to kind of come into all of her comedic skills as this lead character. We talked about having Anna Gasteyer, who she's known since SNL, show up as a guest star in one of the episodes. And if you, like me, have watched a lot of long, challenging shows, it's a workplace show that's an actual comedy that's 30 minutes long. I think a lot of people talk about how comedies on TV these days can skew dark or challenging, and Loot has a lot of big ideas and a lot of big feelings to it, but will consistently make you laugh. I really enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed talking to Maya Rudolph, and I think you'll enjoy listening to it. Let's hear my conversation with Maya Rudolph. To get started, if you don't mind, I kind of wanted to go back to the very beginning of Loot and even before that, because when you and Alan Yang and Matt Hubbard made your first show together, Forever, it was really lovely and really different from this. And I loved it so much and would have loved to get more of it. And it kind of it made me wonder if when you guys started working on Loot, you really deliberately made something that was really different from that show for whatever reasons were right to you. Was that part of the thought process when this show first started?
I mean, it felt more like we were taking what we knew, which was working together and investing that in this new idea. I mean, we all know how TV works. We didn't get to do another season, so it wasn't up to us to go like, you know what we're going to do? We're not going to do another season of that show we all loved. We're going to do something incredibly different. Like, it wasn't up to us. But they had this great idea, and we knew that we wanted to work together again. So, it was just a real testament to getting to know people and forging these work friendships that allow you to, speak each other's language. And so we were able to play upon the things that we already established in order for them to go further with this idea. Because they brought this idea to me and I thought like, wow, this feels like such great timing in the world to delve into the world of billionaireism, and if that's a word, and the uber rich. It was just one of those lucky things where you feel like, wow, I wish, I'm so glad that I know these guys and they thought of it, because it's easier for other people to know what you're capable of, But the faith that they had in me to carry this show gave me the faith. Yeah.
What did they tell you that you were capable of? Maybe not that you didn't know, but you wouldn't have pitched for yourself in terms of what you do on Loot.
Just the idea, just that I would never have thought about this arena, this world. I guess when I think about my kinds of characters and what I bring to a character, I never think of the ultra rich. I think we relied on each other. They gave me, this world to explore, and then relied on me to bring my version of some sort of person that would exist there. So there's just a lot of trust in that process of working together.
Yeah, you've said before that you spent a lot of your career, doing things because your friends asked you to come do it with them. And I wonder how it felt being in kind of the reverse position where you're in the middle of this show and you're saying, hey, friends of mine, come with me. Was that an interesting role reversal for you?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, it feels like a dream because, when you're creating something, you always think like, oh, it would be great to have this person or that person, or, knowing someone's strengths or their voice or their sense of their brand of humor, you know how that would work with what you're doing. And so we've had the luxury this whole time to be able to call upon those longstanding relationships. And I just think that stuff makes it richer and better and funnier and more fun. And that's the joy of aging gracefully. I don't know if I was going to say about aging, but it's the joy of these long-term work relationships, these friendships that you get to create over the years. You get to do these projects together and create these wonderful relationships. And why not call upon them, especially in the world of comedy where it's, it can be a group sport, call upon my Magic Johnsons, my Kobe's, my Shaqs, my, Scottie Pippen.
Yeah. So on that topic, I wanted to ask about Anna Gasteyer, who shows up on the, when this episode airs, she's showing up in the latest batch of episodes. Because there's this scene of the two of you walking into the Wells Foundation office that could be just a really standard scene of someone walking into an office, and the two of you together turn it into kind of this entire tour de force. Is that kind of what you're talking about, those long-standing relationships and what you can draw on them for?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think there's always been a room for us to play on this show. I think obviously you see it, that's a perfect example. And we know each other so well, but they wrote it that way. And then they knew that we would add to it. That's really a luxury and such a wonderful, wonderful way to work.
Yeah. What is the conversation between you and the writers and the writers' room when the show is being done? Do they bring stuff to you? Is there a back and forth? Do you kind of wait for it on the day? How much is your involvement there?
It's all of the above. Sometimes, I mean, definitely in this season, because I knew that there were some things that I really wanted to explore with Molly. I'm very opinionated about Molly. I'm always we're always sending each other texts about ideas or links to things we see. But I knew for this particular season, we knew that she was going to delve into wellness. And I thought that was such a rich place to explore. So I had pitched to them, I really wanted to do that 73 questions just because I thought that is such a fun game to deliver and turn, pivot, deliver, and then that sort of like stilted way of speaking. Like if that could be like a parlor room game, I would play it like every Saturday night. It's so fun just to be like, don't forget, I've got this over here. And then you step to the side and it's just really fun.
Hey, Molly, thanks for having us. Ready to answer 73 questions?
Is that one of them? Just kidding. Come on in.
So what else do you do to stay healthy?
Well, right now I'm on the Pompeii diet. I'm eating what the people of Pompeii ate right before they died. Also, mental health is so important. That's why I have an emotional support sloth.
Emotional support sloth?
Mm-hmm. Want to meet it?
Definitely.
Oh, hi, Molly. Do you want to hold it?
I'd love to. This is Arnold. Arnold sleeps 18 hours a night. Only 3 more than me. Thank you, Nicholas. I feel so much better.
Of course.
Come see the rest of the house.
Well, it's also kind of an ideal joke delivery vehicle, right? Because you can just, every single question gives you a setup. And that's not, Loot is very funny, but it doesn't always work at that kind of pace. So it was a different vibe for the show to open it up with.
For sure. And I love that. I think we felt like we had a nice response to Molly going on Hot Ones. And that just felt like a natural progression to especially because there's just so much video content in the world, That's the way people are doing it these days. So
I think when you guys started the show and kind of knew you were going to take on the ultra rich and, have people want to watch the show, you knew that Molly would need to be likable in some way. But likability is such a trap for women in particular with playing characters. Like so many people have to run away from it. How did you figure out that balance for yourself of having, wanting the character to be likable but not limit you or limit the stories you could tell?
I never really felt like it as a trap. I don't know. I just know as a viewer that I feel like, it's hard to relate to hateable, unlikable characters. And Molly is somebody that you want to see have some sort of empathy and be interested in doing good at some point. And because she's saddled with this idea of social responsibility and a conscience, given her position, given her wealth. So I didn't really feel like it would have been very interesting to have played a very typical, quote, billionaire, whatever that means, sort of like unrelatable, out of touch. I feel like the person you want to connect with most is Molly and understand even underneath it all, really, there's this human element. She's at a place in her life where she's struggling. Things have really shifted so radically, and she's got a mess in front of her that she's dealing with, and that no matter what position you're in, you still have to deal with the messy stuff in life sometimes. I like that that's an element of her, because I don't think we've ever really come across a story where we think like, God, that looks perfect. And it is, that there is really, truly no such thing.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about your input in Molly's aesthetics, the hair and the dresses. And there's some great patterns toward the end of the season that feel like they're maybe part of a character development a little bit. What's your input on the clothes?
Well, Kirsten Mann, our costume designer, is a genius. And we've worked together for years. She worked on forever, but I think I've been working with her for almost 15 years, but on so many different shows. But we love creating Molly, through creating this character. And
Mm-hmm.
we have been doing that for a while together. I think there are very few costume designers that I have found that understand comedy when it comes to costumes. And I feel like it's really easy to get it wrong. Tom Broker from Saturday Night Live is another person who is 100% an artist in creating, characters and even just dressing people for comedy in a way that makes the jokes work, makes them better, makes them funnier. And in this case, I feel like we get to do so much with Molly because she's someone who takes things literally. Sometimes she'll dress up. In the first season, we talked about what would she wear to her first day at work. And we thought, oh, she would ask herself, what would Beyonce wear? So she got an outfit that looked exactly like Beyonce's outfit. And on top of that, Kirsten just knows me and she knows how much I love clothing. I'm a secret costume designer, and I've just always loved getting the chance to create in that way. And we have to be pulled away from fittings because we really truly enjoy doing it, and we have far too much fun. But it is one of the greatest joys about doing this show for me, truly.
Are there Molly outfits that you would wear or have worn in your own life?
Oh yeah. Well, I borrowed some pajamas to go to the Renaissance tour, but they're like cute pajamas, but they have like feathers on the ends or whatever, because I don't own pajamas with feathers. But
They seem very impractical.
Yeah, I would wear. I mean, I'm kind of a sucker. I would wear most of it. I never want Molly to look bad, but she definitely dresses up far more than I ever would. But I love that about her, and I just feel like that's such a part of when trying to create a character. Like, how would this person live? What would they be wearing? What would they, all those questions you ask. If money weren't an issue, what kind of purse would you have? What would you buy? What kind of coat would you wear? What kind of shoes would you wear? It's fun to think about that stuff.
So we were talking earlier about the the thrill of being able to invite people to come play with you on your show. And I'm curious how that changes, the work on the set when you are the person at the center of the thing, as opposed to, coming into something of someone else's. Do you feel like you have a different position among the cast or, as a producer as well as a cast member? Did that change the way that you work as an actor being at the center of this?
Yes, but in a way that actually felt very comfortable. I really do enjoy being part of an ensemble. It's where I learned to do comedy in sketch comedy and in improv. And I find myself far funnier among funny people as opposed to being the center of something. So getting the chance to call upon people that I know are funny, that to amass a group of just home run hitters that can deliver is so much fun, because you get your murderer's row of people that can come and crush and do a great job, and it just makes the collective whole so much better. I've always loved that. It's kind of like being in a band. It just feels cooler and more fun. I don't really. It's like I for years I thought like, oh, I just want to be like the straight man. Like, you want to be like the wife or like the person, and it's less interesting to me as I've realized that those characters that you get to play that interact with the other characters are just far more interesting and more fun. And then it's playing off of the other people that makes it more fun for me. So yeah, I mean, Matt and Alan have been great about being open to me bringing in people. And I've got, these relationships I've had for years of people that I love. I think we've all discovered that you just get so much more out of it, by having those relationships. I just feel like that chemistry is so hard to recreate when you can work with people. And I have so many great friends from my days at the Groundlings. I mean, Nat Faxon is one of them. And we've been improvising together for years. And there's something very special about that, and it's hard to replicate.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten until so recently that you guys had been together in the way back, 12 years ago, which, is not even nearly as long as you've known each other. But I wonder if that contributes to the Molly and Arthur slow burn romance that you get over the course of the season. Like, you could do that with another actor, but does it make the audience root for you more, you think, if you've known someone for that long to build that?
I mean, I guess I feel like we knew that we were going to be sharing our chemistry with people from, like, I think that didn't know us as working together from day one. And not to say that we knew that there would be some sort of how far the romantic story would go. I mean, I
Sure.
don't think of Nat that way. Let me make that perfectly clear. He's like my brother. But yeah, it's nice to know that that you can just show that extra added layer of just like knowing someone so well. I don't know, it just permeates the performance in a way that I feel like it's hard to put your finger on, but it feels great to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I know that you said you don't play favorites, but you talking about the group dynamic, reminds me that I think my favorite scenes in the show are often the ones where everyone's in the office together and there's that ping-ponging thing where you get the group dynamic and everyone gets a line in there. Is that the example of what you're talking about how a group setting is your favorite?
It really is. And those are really like my favorite days. I mean, I know they're the longest days, but our conference room days are so fun because it's like playing Mad Libs or something. You know that like this person's going to get this kind of a quip in and this kind of a joke. And I love that setup for comedy. It's such a fun way to play. Yeah.
Do you think that like there is an SNL to workplace comedy pipeline? I mean, 30 Rock being the obvious example, but I feel like when you've worked in a place like that where the group setting is so important, where the workplace is so fascinating, it like gives you a sense of the power of a workplace comedy. And does that theory hold any water to you?
I mean, sure. I think it's also really a testament to a lot of us who, like I said, have come from sketch. I mean, obviously not all people that are on SNL come from sketch backgrounds. A lot of people came, there's a lot of stand-ups there, and a lot of impressionists. And that's a whole different world. That's a very solo lifestyle. That's like lone wolf stuff that I find really fascinating. And I don't know how to write in that way. I would love to, but I've never done it. And so I think it's been a natural progression for people like me or for somebody like Amy or Tina, that come from that. We have those similar backgrounds, absolutely.
Yeah.
And because when you know your players, then you can insert this person's voice here and there, and it's just such a wonderful way to showcase all of it at the same time. Absolutely.
Yeah. In the streaming age, it's really hard to know when a show is growing, how many people are watching it. But it does feel to me like Loot's growing a lot in its second season, that the audience is building. Do you get that sense, too, that it's grown?
Only in responses from people, yeah. I feel like people have really been reaching out to me to say that they're enjoying it, that they're finding, I think the momentum of it. I really feel like we tried to make a funnier season, and I feel like people are that's been growing on people. But yeah, it does feel like there's a bit of momentum in the air.
Yeah.
It's just when people stop me, and that's when I notice it, or like, wow, okay, cool, you're watching it. Like it is, I'm always surprised, especially in a world of streamers, because there's 3 million shows.
Yeah. Well, and you've been, working as an executive producer in this streaming age. You've had a lot of shows go to streaming. And I wonder if you've kind of noticed trends in terms of what people are paying attention to, how things get attention. Like, has it evolved in any way? Have you been able to keep track of what people want anymore?
No. I mean, I don't think anybody, I don't think that anything makes any sense right now.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are looking for jobs after the strike. Like, it's all just so wild. I feel like since I've started working in streaming, all I keep hearing in my head is like, this is like the wild, wild west of TV. Like, when I sit down to watch TV, I don't know what to watch unless it's something that someone told me to watch, or I'll look on my recommendations and I think to myself, I don't know what any of this is. Truly. Like, there's so much. It's crazy. Yeah. And also, I would love to know who has the time to watch all of it. But I guess there's something for everybody, because how can you watch all of it? It's wild.
In theory, Emmy voters are watching everything, but I'm not sure how
Yes.
they're supposed to do it either because there's way too much.
I guess they get better bring their iPad to the treadmill or something, or the shower. I don't know.
It works sometimes. So as you continue to produce your own stuff and produce things for other people, are your goals still the same as where you started, where you really wanted to work with some up-and-coming people? Is that still the focus of the producing work you're doing?
I think it's less about like, here, child, let me shepherd you from the wind, and more just like I feel like anything that you can do to bring good things forward matters. So whether it's people that I know, writers that I know that I think are great, absolutely, anything helps. I mean, honestly, it just feels like whatever sticks, go for it. And I know for me, I'm really just invested in helping to create projects that I want to watch, that I want to see. So that's really always been my MO, but I think even more so, like, you're working on these things and they have to really matter to you and you have to really love them. So,
yeah. And despite that kind of Wild West nature of streaming and not knowing what people want, do you feel like there's still a climate for the things that you want to make and want to watch to get made? Do you feel optimistic about getting those things through still?
absolutely. Yeah. Optimism is high. And I feel like I'm never going to stop having ideas for things and a desire to create. I think it's just a matter of trying to find the right group of people to make it with. And so far, I'm getting a chance to do that, which feels very lucky.
So to wrap things up, you guys have talked about wanting to make a third season of Loot, and I know there's nothing confirmed yet, but do you have dreams to go bigger with it? Are there ideas to go different or bigger with the next season?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a very sky's the limit show in terms of anything can happen because money can really turn into anything. So I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to push it even further and see things that we haven't seen before. Absolutely. I mean, we talk so much about the world, the world being so big, and then maybe even just pushing that to like really going somewhere. So I would like to see her go even further. Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's show. I'll be back next week diving back into the Emmy race because that is still ongoing as June approaches and the eligibility period ends. And I'll be joined on that episode by my colleague here at The Ankler, Elaine Lowe. This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thank you again to my guest co-host, Joe Reid. Get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also email me by emailing Katey@theankler.com. We will see you next week.